Hi, this is Emily with Pixel Breakdown, and today I have Sam here. You want to introduce yourself and give a quick pitch as to what your game is?
Sure. I'm Sam. I run DOSMan Games. We're currently working on Skarab, which is an ancient Egyptian first-person shooter inspired by the shooters of the 90s.
Yeah, I really love the art style of it. So I'm excited about this one. Is there an origin story for DOSMan Games? Like, how did the studio come to be?
Sure. So we sort of started out. I was just having a conversation with a friend. We used to write articles together about games all the time, and we'd stumbled upon this engine during that phase of our lives. And I thought, I'm just going to take a week. I'm just going to play around with this engine. I've never developed or made any games before or anything, and just kind of see what happens. And I threw together this terrible game where all of the enemies were myself that I'd taken photos of me in the kitchen wielding a kitchen knife, and it just, although it was terrible, I'd made something, and I'd made something really quickly, and I was coming off of that feeling inspired. I was like, oh, I'm gonna remake this. I'm gonna make it better. I'm gonna make games doing other stuff. I'm just gonna just stretch all of my creativity that I've been keeping back because I didn't know that I was into game development until right this moment. And then sort of as time went on, which hasn't been a whole lot of time, but as time went on, we found an artist, we brought him in. The friend that I was talking to started doing composing for the games as well.
Nice.
We ended up helping others bring their games to Steam as well, using the same engine. And now we've got this weird little monopoly on this little game engine that no one really knows about. But yeah, it's working. I think people seem to like our games. People seem to enjoy what we're doing and look forward to it. And that's an awesome feeling.
Yeah, I'm curious because you keep referring to it as the engine, and I have it down to ask you about what game engine you use later on. But I'm curious, what engine is it?
So it's called Easy FPS Editor, and it's this little engine they built in Russia. I think it's some sort of offshoot of Game Maker or something along those lines. But it basically allows you to build your own Doom-like games. And you can do it very simply, sort of just very surface level, point A to point B, maybe collect a key on the way, or you can sort of dive a bit further into its own scripting language and do some cooler things that way.
Very interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard of that. So it's basically like they took a pre-existing engine and then modified it to tailor towards first-person shooter type games.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen some people try and make third-person shooters on it, but it's incredibly janky.
Okay, yeah. Sometimes tools are out there that are made specifically for this one thing, and it's okay. They only work for that one thing. So yeah, where did the idea for the game Skarab come from?
I listen to a lot of death metal. And one of my favorite bands is Nile, who are very ancient Egypt in their themes. Like all of their songs are about the Egyptian gods and things like that. And I've always been a fan of Egyptian mythology as well. Yeah. So I sort of just took the things I liked and decided we're going to make this.
Yeah. I can definitely see why it's appealing. I went through a phase where I was really deep into the ancient aliens side of things with Egypt. I was like, oh, this is really cool. So yeah. But yeah, I see the draw. It is a beautiful and just very intricate inspiration. Yeah.
And it's quite I'm not going to say unique, but it's quite rare to see people touch on ancient Egypt in the FPS genre and not sort of just fill it with guns as well. Right. So you've got Serious Sam, obviously, where you're running around and killing all these aliens in Egypt. We're right up your street. But then you've got sort of the RTS side is sort of doing the more authentic ancient Egypt, and it rarely has that crossover. And something we've tried to do is, for the most part, keep it feeling quite sort of time period authentic.
Oh, interesting. Is there any like archaeology or like forbidden archaeology like throwbacks in there, or is it kind of just this world that you made up that's inspired by these things?
I mean, it's inspired by, and initially sort of going in, we had all these ideas that we were going to make it really like close to like Indiana Jones and the Mummy. We had this early mechanic we were trialing with a boulder that sort of rolls after you. But we couldn't animate the boulder because the way we had to do it was spawn it as an enemy projectile, which in the engine you can't animate. So it just looked really, really stupid. But we've kept like different traps and things like that. So you've got like arrows that just come out the walls if you step on a pressure plate, or you've got like jumping puzzles over like ruins and things like that.
Yeah.
So it does feel
intriguing.
a bit archaeologic, if you will.
Yeah. No, definitely. It ties into like the discovery theme also. And I actually think the engine that you were working in, it not having like something set up for like, even though the rolling like boulder didn't work out, I think it's kind of clever to be like, oh, let's try and have it be a projectile, since we can do that in the engine. So yeah, it's just interesting to hear that you still like tried it, even though it didn't work out. So I saw mentioned like Powerslave, Tomb Raider, and Quake were inspirations. So like what elements of those games made it into Skarab, and what elements did you maybe intentionally leave out?
So when it comes to Powerslave, we largely wanted to lift the sort of the Egyptian theme, obviously. Pull that in as much as possible. We did want to make it a bit more Egypt authentic, so we didn't want to have like the big machine guns and things like that. But also we definitely wanted to sort of nod to that audience and be like, we know that there's people out there that really love Powerslave. We're sort of trying to make more of that in our own special way. With Tomb Raider, it's really the traps and the platforming as you sort of delve into tombs and things like that. And then with Quake, it's more a case of the boss fights, the sort of pacing of the combat. I watched a lot of Quake combat scenario tutorials, sort of as I was learning map design and game dev and stuff. So a lot of that has sort of got into each of my games. So I feel like not mentioning it is heresy.
It sounds like a good mix. And I do love that you brought in sort of the like traps and environmental hazards from Tomb Raider, because I think that takes a first-person shooter up a notch from just like you're shooting everything around you to like, no, there's environmental stuff too. You got to be careful, be cognizant of that. And yeah, it sounds very interesting. I saw also it's referred to as a boomer shooter. Yeah. And they're known for speed and chaos, but Scarab does have this like exploration, secrets, and verticality. How do you balance that like classic combat feel with modern sense of discovery?
Well, a lot of the sort of combat encounters in Skarab are still super fast, and I feel like that sort of leans into the whole boomer shooter thing. So a lot of the enemies will go down in sort of 1 to 2 hits of whatever weapon that you've got. Later in the game, when you've got sort of these loads of weak mobs and you've got like the strongest weapons, it does give you that whole power fantasy thing, which is really awesome. But also early on, you're facing a lot of enemies that are trying to get you with projectiles, so you can't really get up to them and do that whole 1-hit, 2-hit kill thing very easily. So we let the player sort of go off the beaten path a little bit. We've got breakable vases, boxes that will have like maybe ammo for a ranged weapon in there, to sort of make things a bit easier, a bit more varied on the player as well.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. I think it's cool too how you were saying you watched other I'm taking it like streams of other games or people playing other games to kind of
Yeah,
draw some inspiration. I do that too. Like it's like if I have a set amount of time and I know I won't be able to master a game in that time frame, like just throwing on streams of people playing games always like shows some good, you'll always walk away with like some more knowledge in game design, sort of.
definitely, or just a bit more sort of inspired from it. I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
I was really struggling to put together a city level in Skarab, and I sat down and I watched someone play the first few levels of Wizardom, which is Apogee's new like medieval fantasy boomer shooter. And just seeing the sort of ideas that he'd put into place with quite a block-based approach as well, really inspired me with how I made my city level as well. So it can
Yeah.
get me out of a rut as well.
Yeah, exactly. So I love that like streaming and people recording themselves playing games and uploading it to like YouTube is becoming more prevalent because it's definitely beneficial. Um, yeah, especially getting out of a rut. Like when you don't have any ideas or you're stuck, just watch a
Yeah.
stream of a game that interests you. And yeah. Um, and sometimes seeing the way the streamer also like plays in a different way than the game, like the original designer intended, also is inspiring because it's like,
Oh, yeah.
that's a very interesting way to go about that. Um, so how did like the structure of the levels evolve over development? Like, did you start with linear combat arenas or open spaces with multiple paths and secrets?
I wrote down a list when we were making our game design document of all of the sort of areas that I wanted to touch on. So I had like, the market level. Let's go to a village in this one. Let's go into a pyramid on this one. But then as I sat down to sort of make the levels once we had all the textures done and everything, it just didn't really pan out the way that I envisioned with the game design document. So it just sort of fell into place that all of a sudden we had this, how do I put it? Yeah, it just sort of happened. Like I would just start building like a shape, and then all of a sudden I'd be like, okay, so yeah, that's just definitely going to be like a little temple area. And then after that, I'd start building another shape, and then it doesn't necessarily feel completely natural or cohesive at points. It feels a bit gamey in the way that it's laid out. I'm really tripping over my words, but it feels. But yeah, it wasn't like a conscious decision to be like, okay, combat arena, combat arena, combat arena, or even
Right.
narratively, it just sort of free flowed from the mind.
Yeah, I wonder if it feels gamey to you because you're designing it and like I I'd imagine it probably feels a more fluid to a player going into this not having actually spent all this time
Yeah.
like working out where things are going to be. So that's important to remember. Yeah. Um it'll be interesting to see like what people say. I think this is like a really interesting game, and again, like the art itself, like just the art, I was like, oh, this is really cool. um, so let's talk weapons. I was seeing that
Yep.
there's a lot of variety from Kopesh slashes. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
To summoning literal locusts. So how did you decide like what went into the arsenal and what sort of like design went into that?
So something we really wanted to do was have a good balance between sort of melee and ranged combat. Again, that we've made in the past, Reaper was really heavy on the melee, and it doesn't feel always great in the engine, especially when it's sort of the only thing that you're doing. The engine does work a bit better when you've got these ranged weapons to sort of play around with. So we didn't want to lean too hard into melee. but it's still something that I personally think is awesome. You get much more of feedback, I think, bonking someone over the head with a mace as opposed to like picking away at them with like little spears and stuff. So we wanted that balance. So I sat down. I made it. I came up with 3 melee weapons I really wanted and 3 ranged weapons I really wanted, and then we just sort of drip fed the player, each of them like alternating throughout the campaign. But in terms of sort of what they are, I wanted things to feel different to what you usually get in shooters and slashers. So pulling from sort of an ancient Egyptian arsenal was quite cool for that. We do have some things which are a bit not run of the mill, but sort of to be expected of the setting. So you've got like a bow and arrow, you've got like a spear, but like one of the weapons that we've got is like is a sling, and we are, I think, one of only 2 first-person shooters that have a sling. So
nice.
I quite like that.
So when you're saying that you kind of like drip feed them to the player, do they actually get like set weapons at certain times in the game to use, or is it like you build up this arsenal that you then select what you want to use?
Yeah, so yeah, you do sort of build up. Yeah, you build up an arsenal. Once you've got a weapon, you've got it forever.
Oh, okay.
And then we sort of manage when the player uses things by, okay, this is when we'll give you ammo for that.
Right.
Like the locusts are quite overpowered. They just tear through the flesh of whatever enemy you shoot them at. So we're quite careful to be like, okay, we'll mostly give those to you like just before like a really hard boss or something like that. But yeah, like we find moments to maybe give the player a weapon early if they're sort of smart enough, if they're exploring enough. So there might be like a little platforming secret that gets them something a level earlier, or even I think 2 levels earlier in one case. So
yeah,
we do like using that to kind of reward as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how these weapons all react. I want to see the scarabs tearing through the flesh of the enemies. And yeah, I guess that ties into design because it does sound like an OP weapon, and obviously you don't want the player to just press one button and be able to skate through the whole game, right? It's like you want to limit the ammo and the ability to use these things, so they actually have to make strategic decisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting.
So like there's one boss in the game who you can just spam with sort of all the locusts that you can find in the level, but that's not enough to take him out. So you need to think on your feet a little bit as well. So
I'm intrigued. I do. I mean, it would be interesting to see someone streaming playing the game thinking that like the locusts will destroy the boss, and then it's like, oh no. No, not even that. Like that first moment would be great to see someone's face.
Oh yeah.
So did you lean into any kind of like build your play style? Oh, actually, I mean, this question kind of we already discussed. So yeah, it is. I was going to ask about like if it's like build your play style or react to chaos, but it sounds like you're giving them the ammo at the right times, but they still have to make decisions.
I mean, they'll always have the sort of choice between whatever they have. We don't sort of, although we will give a lot of something at the points we want them to have that thing, we don't consciously like withdraw it at any point.
Yeah.
So a player that goes through and just stocks up on bow ammo can use that sort of whenever they want, or if they want to keep enemies at bay more, they can just go for the spear. Because that's got a bit more range to it. So I think players will sort of gravitate towards certain weapons depending how they tend to play these sort of games.
Yeah. I'm one of those players who like I I stock up on stuff and I'm scared to use them. Like, and so like I'll be at the end of the game and I'm like, I have these like 8 scarabs that I collected along the way it's like I should have used these. I'll die like 20 times before I'm like, okay, I'll use a scarab here or something. And I'm trying to get better about that. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see like the different play styles that come out of this game.
I mean, during development, due to the engine sort of being quite early on, we did run into a bunch of different bugs and issues and things like that. And one of the most sort of frustrating ones is that sometimes when you go from one level to the next, the engine just strips you of all your ammunition.
No.
So
is there any back-end file that you can store the numbers in or something?
I think what happens is as it loads, it wipes that, and there's been an update to the engine that does fix this. But when we migrated to the new version, a bunch of other stuff went wrong. So we're just like, you know what? Let's find a different workaround. So at the start of each level now, we're like, okay, player, here's a load of ammo. It's not a boss fight, but there's just loads of ammo here. Don't worry.
That's unfortunate.
It does sort of encourage the player to use what they have when they have it.
Yeah, I like that. That's really fun. Like that sort of use this. You're gonna get more. But as the engine side, it's like persistent data across levels seems like the number one thing that you want to like solidify. I don't know. That's so crazy to me.
It's both a nightmare and quite fun to be working with this engine. Like I find it really awesome to work within limitations. And I think that's what pushes me to be a bit creative. Like I'm not the most experienced game dev in the world. I haven't really delved into other engines or anything. But thinking of ideas and seeing ideas in other games and thinking how I could apply something similar to that in easy FPS, I find super exciting. And when we do run into walls like this, I try not to see it as sort of the end of the world. And I think, okay, how can we combat this? And then I find it quite fun trying to work out how to do that.
Damn, I think you're like fluidity in game design and like the half glass, or what's it, like the glass half full versus my like pessimistic, like the glass is empty or whatever. Like, I think that's great. And I think you're right. Like it does push you to make decisions for the game and its design that you normally wouldn't. But a lot of times that does like create something that's different from the norm or, you know. So yeah, I think that's great. Yeah. Is it your dog over there?
Yeah, it is. Sorry.
Aw, no, you're fine. So yeah, how do you? We discussed like the weapons already, but I do want to know: is there any other decisions that went into like balancing ranged and maybe more up close combat?
Yeah. So the very first ranged weapon that you get in the game is the sling, and the sling takes a while to wind up. So every single shot, you've got to load it into the sling. You've got to swing the sling around, and then you've got to release it. And a lot of the sort of playtesting feedback we were getting quite early on was, "Oh, this is really slow. Nobody's gonna like want to use this. Nobody's gonna like want to sort of get to know the weapon because they'll just wait till they get something better." So rather than appease them and make them have fun with the weapon, I forced them to use it. So like early on in sort of towards the end of the first level, you've got this scene where you're walking along like a pier, and there's lots of archers and guys throwing spears at you from up on the cliffside. So you can't get to them with your melee weapon. You have to resort to the ranged. And once people do sort of settle in and understand the weapon, because it tends to be one hit kill, they begin to like it, and then they'll use it later on in the game as well.
I love hearing the like design philosophy or like the thought that goes into how you're hoping to like guide the player to naturally start using these other tools. I think that that's really great. Like just design in general. Um, so did you run into any issues when designing all these systems?
We ran into a massive issue quite early. Sorry, 2 seconds.
Yeah, you're good. Aw.
So yeah, we ran into one quite annoying decision early on, which was after the artist had sat down and made sort of all of the animation frames for the spear. We had to completely rethink it. So the spear was initially a ranged weapon. You just get a set number of them, and you would just like lob them at your enemies and
Right.
impales them. But what we tried to do was tie it to a mechanic where as soon as you completely run out of spears, it would delete the weapon from your inventory. So that, okay, so I've got no spears, so now when I'm scrolling through all my weapons, I won't see a hand holding a spear and not be able to use it. So yeah, we really thought about how to make that work. We play tested a bunch of different ideas, but we just couldn't get it to a point where it would work reliably. And we brought in some outside help to try and take a look at it as well. And they couldn't figure out how to do it properly either. So in the end, we just completely scrapped all of those animation frames. We
Oh,
changed
wow.
the weapon entirely to be melee instead of ranged. And that, of course, affected the way we planned for each of the weapons to be introduced, because now we can't introduce a melee weapon for a section that's all about ranged combat. So yeah, that's sort of how that all panned out.
Did you do like you were mentioning like playtesting? Is it internal or do you have like people from outside playtesting it?
So we have like a small community, I guess. Not like I wouldn't call it internal or external really. It's like it's me and Ryan, who's the composer who I started building games and chatting to about it. We will play each of the games sort of through a bunch of times, and then we've got other people like the developers that we might publish their games. Like they'll come and they'll give it a run through, let
Yeah.
us know what they think, and then we've got a couple of other guys as well, who are sort of internal QA, but I feel like we're too small to say internal QA, so they're just guys that are along for the ride.
Yeah.
And they'll play through it and then sort of give us their thoughts as well.
Yeah, that's playtesting is important. It is interesting. I don't know if I could handle playtesting being a bunch of just other game developers. Like that sounds almost like a nightmare. Because you'd already know what kind of like criticisms you'll see maybe, or like they definitely have to have like a big the background story, or like a lot to probably understand like what you're trying to do, or like to not end up questioning every decision. Yeah, how has that been?
It's not been the worst. Like, unfortunately, so much of the playtesting is, oh, I'm not quite sure I like how this works. That's an engine limitation, and we see that
Right.
even when we get to the point where we're releasing the games. A lot of the people who are sort of mentioning things, they're things we can't do anything about. Oh, it'd be great if I could invert my mouse. Sorry, the engine doesn't allow for that, but we've let the
Right.
engine developers know. So yeah, but for the most part, it's quite helpful because they're people who really know how to like get out of bounds, and the more they play with the engine, they now know how to break things in certain ways that players might think to do, like standing up in tiny little crawl spaces can throw things off a little bit, or
Yeah.
jumping onto a certain. There was one issue where if you jump from a staircase onto the edge of the bottom of another stair, it just flings you out the map, which is quite an interesting one. So we had to think about our staircases quite well.
That's funny. I love little bugs like that. One thing you mentioned also was that you like had the UI to where you like when the ammo's out, you just completely remove that weapon from the inventory. That seems useful for making like fast decisions for the player. I'm curious, like, do you have someone specifically that works on UI stuff, or are you kind of like just going with the flow of like what feels natural to you?
I mean, the UI art wise is all done by our artist. So Skarab was literally it was me and the artist who did all of the animation frames, did all of the enemies, all the weapon sprites, literally everything. And he just sort of came to me with the UI design and was like, "Well, what do you think of this?" And I think it's quite a cool looking one as well. Like it's got this proper ancient Egyptian feel. It's like decaying.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm super happy with sort of how it looks. In terms of sort of how things operate with it, it's not too complicated. Like we've just got like keys up at the top right. We've got weapon bottom right, and then health bottom left as well.
Okay. Yeah. I know UI can be something that like they say when it's done right, you don't really notice it, right? But it's really easy to notice it when it's wrong. And yeah, it's just interesting to hear like sort of the thought process behind that. So I've mentioned this before, the art is like immediately striking. So yeah, as far as like landing on that look, did you give the artist like a general feel of what you were wanting, or was it kind of like, hey, we really like the ancient Egypt history stuff, and can you make something for that?
So the artist that we work with, his name is Fred. He has this insane workflow where he like I can say to him, I want 4 different types of sword enemy, and he'll have them with me by like a couple of hours time.
Oh wow.
It's ridiculous, his work rate, and it's because he's worked this sort of system out where he's got all these templates which he can start with, and it's all done in this art style that you see with Skarab. So the ones that take him sort of a bit longer are the ones that sort of are a bit less common. So like we've got Horus is one of the bosses, so he's got big wings and he flies. So that would take him a bit longer than say sort of all of the humans. But for all of his games, he does sort of carry the same art style across. So if you look at the other titles that we've put out, like Reaper or Flash of the Blade X, it's got that same sort of trademark Fred art style with it.
Oh, nice. It is a beautiful art style. And I'll include links to those games too that you've already released so everyone can check those out. I'll say, yeah, so we talked about the engine already, I think, pretty well. Are there any moments where one part of your team said, like, this is awesome, and another part of the team was like, this is going to break everything if we add this in?
I mean, we did have at one point this idea that there was this like big gate that would be in front of you, and like almost like a chessboard of pressure plates, and you would step on one pressure plate and it might open the door, or you step and then you keep moving towards the door and you'd step on another pressure plate on the way and that would close the door again, and you had to find a different pressure plate, and then maybe one pressure plate would start opening other doors that shoot arrows at you or fireballs at you. But it just became the most convoluted, hard to sort of work around thing in the whole world. And then because the engine's sort of so janky as well, trying to make it do things and then redo the same thing, and then have different effect for other things, like it just ended up basically capsizing the entire idea.
Dang.
That was fun.
It does sound interesting. Maybe you can save that for like another game in the future. You mentioned that you also do like publishing, and I am really curious about that. Like, what sort of advice would you give to developers looking to find a publisher? Like, what sort of things do you look for?
So when it comes to the sort of stuff that we're publishing with DOSMan anyway, we're very specific in what we're looking for. So at the moment, we're very much looking at projects built in the same engine, and because of that, we're sort of specialized to be able to help them because we're developing in it as well.
Right.
And we know all the limitations and what different ideas can mean what. But just in general, I think I think it sort of leans into our ethos a little bit, which is the game industry seems to be heading more and more towards short experiences. And I think that the sort of shorter the game that you've got, the easier it is to throw together a vertical slice for it. The sort of the smaller the scope, the healthier everyone is in the situation as well. The developer, the player, the wallet.
Right.
So it all, yeah, I think it all just ties together that way.
Interesting. So you think that the games industry as a whole is moving towards like shorter content?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at things like, if you look at, say, 10, 15 years ago, you've got all of these sort of bigger. Oh, sorry, one sec. I'm just gonna grab him something. I do think that the industry is moving a lot towards smaller experiences. If you look at some of the sort of bigger hits of the past few years, things like, say, Buckshot Roulette, Balatro, things like Post Void, people seem to much more be favoring these quick bursts of game rather than sitting down for hundreds of hours and playing these RPGs that they can never ever put down and feel guilty about not finishing.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Wait,
yeah.
So it's not that it's like shorter content and like the entire game is shorter, but more like a game that you can play in short bursts, rather?
Yeah, well, sort of both.
Oh, okay.
Because yeah, what we're doing is sort of 1 to 3 hour long games that don't necessarily have a lot of replayability, but are priced a lot more on the cheap side, so that everyone can sort of experience it, no matter sort of where they're from in the world, no matter their sort of income. And I think, yeah, things like Post Void, for instance, carry that as well. Like, you're unlikely to spend 10 hours even in Post Void unless you're quite bad at it or really addicted to it. But it's I keep seeing more and more instances of things like that succeeding. Mouthwashing from last year as well, another really short game comparatively to a lot that's out there that is drawing a lot more eyes, I think, because of it.
Interesting. So is there any advice you would give to aspiring devs who want to make a game like this?
Yeah. Try. Like, for me, the longest time the holdback was I didn't think I could do it. And like, I see people around me who have ideas for games, but sort of are held back by either being too much of like a perfectionist or other things, and just I think so much of the sort of fear of people getting into game dev is the learning curve. And I think just setting yourself a really tiny deadline and making something rubbish is sort of a perfect way to sort of jump in.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Just do it. Just try it. Yeah, you'll learn a lot. So can you summarize the game development experience in 3 words?
I really should have thought about this when you sent through the question list. But rewarding, exciting, and depressing.
all very accurate. Yes.
Like there's really something to be said about sort of when you release something and you see people are playing it and you see they're reviewing it and hopefully liking it. But the other side of that coin is when you're sitting there every day refreshing your wish list count and just being completely drained of all energy and will to work on it. But it is exciting, especially sort of when you start something new and when you're really when there's that moment when your game sort of just comes together. Like, you've talked about it for ages, you've written stuff down about it, you've got assets coming through, But that moment when you can sort of stand in your game and you've got the music and you're looking around and there's sort of no placeholder, and you've got a loop and it all works, that is just like the coolest moment.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It all feels worth it then, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, my last question for you is, what's the one thing that you hope players take away from their experience playing your game?
The excitement for a sequel.
That's real. Period. Yeah.
No, I mean, I hope they come out wanting more. I think that sort of lends back to the shorter experiences. I never want someone to come out of my game and feel like, okay, yeah, I've had enough, I'm done. I want people to come out wanting more, wanting a sequel, wanting more stuff set in that universe or things like that.
Yeah, definitely. I see that, and from the way that you're putting everything together, I could see that being the experience that people have. It looks like a very intriguing environment, and it'll be interesting to see the gameplay that you've created, working with these limitations, but also expanding on these other things that maybe you didn't plan on expanding on design wise originally. And yeah, I think it looks like a good game. So yeah, I really appreciate you coming on and talking about your game.
No, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Also, I will include links down below so everyone can follow along on, your progress here.